Yo, what up, a-holes? Thank you for tuning into the Holistic A-Hole podcast. My name is Eric Levi, and I'm the Holistic A-Hole. How the heck are you doing today? Hope you're doing well, especially because that's what this podcast is all about. This podcast is all about hoping that you're feeling well, wellness. So if you're listening to this, even if you're not feeling well, my goal is to make it so that you are feeling well. So thank you for tuning in. Got a great episode here for you. Going to talk about a book that I actually just completed, and I want to talk about it now because I'll be honest, the information was so dense and so complicated, also so simplistic that if I don't just talk about it now, I'm going to forget it tomorrow. And that wouldn't be fair to you a-holes, because I feel like this book I'm going to talk about, which goes by the title Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, I feel this is a very important book that, just like other books I've talked about on this podcast, I really think everybody should read. However, this book particularly is kind of difficult. So I don't know if everybody can read it, but if you're in like that self-help mode, if you're in like that, I need some information that's going to pull me out of this funk or depression, or just give me a tool or something, anything that can get me to stop this recording of I'm a loser, I'm a failure. I feel like this book is it, and I want to talk about it and just kind of go through my thoughts about it because I have quite a few, hash it out with you a-holes, and then would love to hear what you think about it. But before we do that, I want to first welcome everybody, new and old listeners. If you're new here, just take a hot second, hit the subscribe button. You'll get this bad boy popping up in your podcast feed every time it's released, which is usually about twice a week. Some weeks, I always say I'm going to go for 3, but I get caught up with other stuff. But this week, I'm going to try to go for 3. So hit subscribe if you love the podcast and you want to make sure you get it every time it comes out. And then, if you haven't done this yet, go on to iTunes. If you love the episode, if you love the podcast, leave a 5-star review. It takes literally a second to do. It helps me grow the podcast, and it lets me know you're out there and enjoying it. And you know what else lets me know you're out there and enjoying it? Find me on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all Holistic A-Hole. Twitter's at Holistic A-Hole. Instagram at Holistic A-Hole. Join the Facebook page, Holistic A-Hole. I think pretty soon there's going to be a group coming out here. So make sure you find me on all the socials so you can be updated once that happens, because we're going to take this bitch in a whole new stratosphere. I'm really excited, and some cool things are happening here in Holistic A-Hole land. Oh, and also go subscribe to the YouTube channel because there's new videos coming out every single week. We got the paleo hack, people loving that. We got the vegan Trump supporter, going to put one of those out this week. And then I'm going to start putting out some different vlogs type stuff. So a lot of cool stuff happening here at Old Holistic A-Hole Enterprises. Even though we're not an enterprise, we haven't even incorporated. I'm just a dude in my bedroom in New York City talking shit about health. But that's what we do. I ain't no goddamn sellout. So, speaking of sellouts, let's talk about my good boy, Bruce Lipton, who's definitely not a sellout. This dude is about as raw and about as unfiltered, for a scientist especially, as they come. Now, like I've mentioned before, you know, one of the crosses to bear here of being the holistic a-hole is just the sheer amount of research I have to do for this podcast, for the YouTube channel. Whenever I put content out, it would be nice if it could be like politics and I could just shoot off whatever the first thought that comes to my mind is, and then that's like, you know, that's what it is. And if I have any kind of base, any kind of following, everybody just rallies around that and starts parroting the shit I say. But I don't think this is what we should be doing with health. In fact, I find this is one of the biggest complicating factors in health news and, health topics and, spirituality and all this stuff, which is everybody has their own opinion. They're like assholes and they all stink, and we just shoot stuff out. And I try to do my due diligence. I try to research. I try to find facts. I try to cross-check stuff. If I hear one thing, I'll cross-check it against the opposite version, and then just kind of see what sticks through my own experimentation, through, testimonials of other people who I trust. For instance, if someone's telling me about the paleo diet, yet they got a muffin top and man titties, I'm not going to go with the paleo diet. But if some dude, who's, pretty thin, lost a lot of weight, is telling me about veganism or about, let's say even keto, right? If somebody's like, keto's great and they're jacked, I'll look into keto, okay? Keto. But, I have to read a lot of shit for this content. And I don't mind. I actually genuinely enjoy it. And there's it's so much endless stuff to look into. And when I first heard about this Bruce Lipton guy, I think I heard him on a podcast, and I was immediately curious, because he was talking about spirituality, but really like the science of spirituality, which is a what do you call that, what is the word, it's like they just don't work together, right? Spirituality, science. I have a lot of these like new agey kind of beliefs, and you tell that to somebody, and then they're gonna start whipping out study after study after study. But what they don't realize is that a spiritual guy, as a holistic a-hole, I also have my own cache of studies. I have a whole artillery full of studies and science, and and there's so much of counter science and studies that sometimes you just need that sixth sense. You need that higher power to really kind of weed through all the bullshit. And when I found Bruce Lipton, he was maybe the first guy that I've heard actually talking in detail, about spirituality. Not to mention, one of the first things that brought me into this holistic world was the idea of epigenetics. I don't know if I'm pretty sure I've talked about epigenetics on this podcast, but I don't think I've done like a specific epigenetics podcast, simply because I don't know enough about it. On the macro, it seems way too foo-foo and, unbelievable, and too much like The Secret to really feel like I can have a convincing grasp on it. But on the micro, when you start digging the facts, epigenetics is really, really interesting. And what Bruce Lipton does is he breaks all that. We've all been on this, thing where it's like, everyone's like, your genes cause everything. If you have the gene for cancer, you're going to get cancer, or you have a very high likelihood of getting cancer. If someone in your family has Alzheimer's, well, now you've got the gene for Alzheimer's, and you're going to probably get Alzheimer's. If you've got the gene for, being a drug addict, right? For being an alcoholic, for being a smoker, for whatever it is, this is the grandstanding that we've done with genetics. We've just basically made it everything. And the fact is, with genetics, at least according to a guy like Bruce Lipton, and many like genetic scientists, is they don't really control as much as we think. I think the easiest way to kind of lay it out, at least to my understanding, is genetics are basically like the software, or genetics are like the hardware. Let's say genetics are the hardware of the system, but that all that gives you is just like the tools to play with, right? The genetics are the speed of your modem, right? Or the speed of your processor, the speed of your video card or whatever, the kind of keyboard you have, right? All the tools that you're working with, those are your genetics. But then epigenetics is like your software, it's the program that you download, and then it's essentially the actions that you take and the choices that you make every single second of every day of your life until you die. This is epigenetics. And it's another version of the nature versus nurture, Forever we thought it was for nature. But when you study epigenetics, you actually learn it's the nurture, Just because you have the cell for cancer doesn't mean you're going to have cancer. It's just living in your body. The programming says, okay, there's a cell that can turn into cancer. Only if the right conditions are set will this gene turn into cancer or give you a higher likelihood that this gene will turn into cancer. And those elements that play into that could be, anything. It's an infinite amount of possibilities. Some people have it so strong that it's like, yeah, maybe you get it where you just live in the wrong city. There's so many carcinogenic factors in our world now that it's really not that hard of a stretch to be like, well, it's just the paint on your walls. There was a chemical in the paint in your walls, and that triggered that cell to go bad, and then boom, you have cancer. For a lot of people, as you study health more and more, you realize it's diet. And what I've kind of grown tired of as I go on this holistic a-hole journey is people just simplifying everything down to diet, even especially vegans, because vegans, they look at you, they'll see somebody eat meat or eat something in butter or, any kind of animal product, eat a bowl of ice cream or yogurt or whatever, and they'll be like, this guy's going to get cancer. You're going to get cancer. You're going to get diabetes. You're going to get cancer. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to get cancer because you eat meat. And quite frankly, there's plenty of people who live to, in their 90s, they live to 100, who eat meat or eat animal or consume animal products and are fine. The vast majority, however, don't. Because really what food is, it's information. Each molecule of food, each cell of food that you eat has its own DNA code, has its own, software in it. And when it goes into your body and gets digested into your system, it becomes a part of you. Everyone's like, well, you got to get your protein from meat. Well, guess what? If you're in that protein is its own set of genetic codes and bacteria and parasites and information that goes into your body. And if your body doesn't just take the kernel of protein and transport it to the muscle and you get jacked, you take everything that comes with that piece of food, So if your body's genetic code says, well, we have this gene, we have this chromosome that can turn into cancer, well then, if you agitate that gene enough and you don't take the right care of yourself, it's going to turn into cancer. So this is basically this is kind of like a boiled down version of what epigenetics is. And this is basically like the underlying thesis of what this book, The Biology of Belief, is all about. It's what Bruce Lipton does is he was a biology professor, and he was a doctor. He studied and he worked with cells, and his job was basically looking at cellular activity under giant state-of-the-art microscopes that would put images of cells all the way down to the mitochondria and the membrane and all the little pieces of the cells that create the cell. He would work with this stuff. So it's not like some quack doctor, coming around being like, oh, hey, if you just think positive, everything in your life's going to be great. Which is exactly what's muddied the water of like self-help and spirituality is this idea that it's so simple that all you have to do is think positive. But actually, in the biology of belief, this is what Bruce Lipton proves. He proves that if you do think positive, but if you think in the right way, then things in your life start to manifest. And, basically what he figured out was that when you look at these cells under these giant microscopes and you can actually see the bacteria within the cell behaving, and within each cell is its own kind of humanity in a way, to where he was able to say, well, these cells, they act a certain way, but then what they also do is they communicate with each other. Our cells this is how that you form beings. Back when the earth, back before humans, back before any kind of life was on the planet, all you had were these single cell organisms. And then eventually what happened was, over time, these single cell organisms started to bond with each other. And then they started to form communities. And once they became communities, this is when you start getting things like plants, right? You start getting grass and trees and, seeds and flowers and, fruit trees and all this stuff, right? It was obviously an evolution, but, the cells start kind of coming together and building their own systems and their own ecosystems and their own communities. And then next thing you know, they're building plants, and then they're building animals, and then over time the animals evolve, and then you get humans. And even within a human itself, we're all made of, he says, 50 trillion cells. And when you break it down even further, it's not just cells. It's like each cell has its own specific job, and this is all programmed into your stem cells. Like a stem cell knows whether it's going to turn into like a skin cell or a blood cell or a bone cell or a brain cell or a heart cell or a lung cell or a kidney cell or a pancreas cell or a toenail cell or whatever it is. The information is programmed in the stem cells, and then those cells become that. But over time, they didn't just, it's not like a creationist point of view where it said, okay, well, there is, God said, let there be man or whatever, and then boom, there was just a man. Our bodies work, though, with that intelligent design, everything kind of works together. When, we have eyes so we can see the world around us, because we needed eyes in order to survive when we were first evolving. We couldn't just be, if we evolved from apes and chimps and monkeys, we needed to have a specific vision to be able to protect us from oncoming attacks, also to be able to hunt food, also to be able to differentiate between colors, to be able to differentiate between predator and prey. These are all functions that these eye cells have evolved over the years. But when you break that shit down into the cellular level, the information of how the cell, the way the cell processes the information is its own life form to begin with, all the way down to the cellular level, all the way down to like the DNA level, even further than the DNA level, the bacteria and the bacteria that builds the DNA, because that's what DNA is made from. It's made from bacteria. It's the most basic, old, ancient life form on the planet, bacteria, So the bacteria itself has its own program. So when these bacterias interact within the cells, and the cells interact within each other, this is when they start to form communities. And they form communities into pieces of us that become, again, our heart, our lungs, our brain, our eyes, whatever it is. And they've all evolved their own purpose. We needed our lungs to be able to filter the air. We needed kidneys to be able to filter the substances that we put in our mouths. We need to deliver to be able to control what goes into the bloodstream, right? Or I think the kidneys control what goes out. The liver controls, kind of what is happening within us. They've all been able to evolve that. But then you break that shit down even further into the cell, and then even further and into the DNA, and then even further into the bacteria, and then even further into the vibration. This is where things start getting crazy, because people will look at you and you're like, hey man, it's nothing but good vibes, right? Good vibrations, bad vibrations. But this is string theory. This is that idea of quantum physics, that everything is controlled through energy. Everything has its own charge, a positive or negative charge. And this is what this is the big thing that Bruce Lipton talks about in the book, which is the charges affect how the proteins in the cells react. If you think of the proteins as having basically like a string of, I guess, think of like a macaroni necklace. The protein is made like a macaroni necklace, and at each end of the macaroni necklace are two giant beads. And those beads connect with each other at some point, or they don't connect with each other. They each have their own charge, whether it's positive or negative. And if they're the same charge, if they're both positive, then they reject each other. But if they're positive and negative, then they bond. And this is happening within all of your chromosomes, happening within all of your DNA. And those charges are simply based off of what? They're based off of energy. That's the crazy fucking thing to me. It's all based off of energy. No matter what conversation, what discussion you get into, when you talk about spirituality, and somebody's a science, what do you call it? Like a science-ophile, a studyophile, where they're just like, well, there's this study and this epidemiological thing and this, observational study, or this control group, or this placebo, whatever it is. If you keep asking why do people get sick when they have this thing? Why do people grow cancer cells when they feel like this? Why? It always goes down to the energy. It's that sixth sense thing that you can't measure it, you can't quantify it, but it's 100% there, and it's what controls everything in the universe. And that's all we know as of now. Maybe in 100 years we break through the next thing, past the energy, past the vibrations. What is the next thing, right? So that's what this kind of biology of belief is, that when you dig in to the cellular level of anything, of a human, of an animal, whatever it is, you can take it all the way down to the level of the protein. And the protein is simply controlled through energy, how the protein reacts. And remember, if the protein is what creates your DNA, or is basically what's at the base of your DNA, how your protein reacts is going to affect how your DNA reacts. So this is when you get cancer. When the protein goes bad and the DNA goes bad, the cell goes bad. If the cell doesn't know to function like a normal cell, if the cell's like, cells are supposed to die. I don't know, every, couple days, couple weeks, whatever it is. We turn over our cells all the time, right? It's called autophagy. Your cell is supposed to have a programmed suicide and die, and then a new cell grows in its place. Cancer happens when that cell doesn't die and then, in fact, starts to replicate. And that comes from the DNA level. So if you have a cell in your body that becomes cancerous, it's because of the DNA level. It just didn't get the message that it was supposed to die. That message essentially retards. I know you're not supposed to say that anymore, but that's That's what it does. The message gets retarded because something happened within the DNA, something happened within the protein. What affects the protein? The energy, the charge at the end of the macaroni necklace. The charge got all fucked up. So now if the charge is all fucked up, the DNA's fucked up, the cell's fucked up, the fucked up cell starts replicating, infecting other cells around it. Next thing you know, you have tumor and you have cancer. This is the crazy shit, right? And if you think about it, what is the most simplistic way to say this? It's all energy, So, yeah, granted, you're not just going to go around and be like, well, I better be happy now because if I'm happy, then I won't get cancer. It just doesn't work like that. There's plenty of happy people who get cancer, but there are other factors, A lot of them are below the surface. We don't even know, I know I've talked about this in a previous podcast, but sometimes those factors are as complex as Wi-Fi radiation, FMR, Bluetooth, or like we were saying before, lead paint, or, people go through those X-ray scanners at the airport, every little bit, right? This is why nutrition's so important, because there's studies. You want to talk about studies? There's studies that sulforaphane in cruciferous vegetables like broccoli seeds is the big one, broccoli sprouts, cauliflower, spinach, kale, things like these. Sulforaphane is essentially what helps fight cancer, helps fight those cancerous cells, essentially goes in and rejuvenates your protein to be correct and not all fucked up in your body. But if you're eating a garbage diet, if you're eating a diet filled with animal products where the animal is giving you, the animal's meat is filled with cortisol, there's a lot of compounds in animal protein, animal fat that just completely disrupt the cellular homeostasis and result in fucked up DNA, fucked up cancer. If you're eating a tortured fucking animal full of cortisol and you're putting that information into your body, you're throwing your body for a loop. Not to mention the fact, the physicality of it, of what happens in your gut when your gut, can't properly digest and flush out all the toxic material that's left in meat and dairy and animal products. But then also you look at plant-based food, a lot of the stuff we eat sprayed with glyphosate and chemicals, and you have GMOs, and you don't know what's going on in the food supply. So, this is why I preach holistic. Because it's not just food. It's not just attitude. It's everything, dude. It's everything. Because you are fighting against the elements. There's nothing you can do. There is no suit of armor that you can wear every day that's going to protect you from all of these factors, You have to approach it from your mind. Protect your mind. You got to protect your body. You got to protect your spirit. If you do all three, you're going to be okay. Because some days, you can't eat healthy. You can't, Some days you're traveling. Some days you're just lazy and you want to go to McDonald's. I totally get that. That's fine, Even though I am very anti-cheat day, I get it. The process is a marathon, not a sprint. And if you fuck up, you fuck up. If you eat some, if you have a rough day at work and you go and gorge on fucking birthday cake and ice cream and, you get fucking drunk or whatever, and you just litter your body with hot dogs and fucking beer and cake and whatever, you're going to have those days. One day of being a piece of shit is not going to doom you to cancer and to death. It's just not. It's not fair for people to even put that fear in people's minds. But if you, in the long run, are like, this is my baseline of being healthy body, healthy mind, surround yourself with positive people, not just positive people, but people who in your heart, are there for you. and you're there for them. Service, man. Deliver service to people. Fucking do things yourself that make you happy. Don't be a slave to the 9 to 5. You're never going to win that carrot, dude. You're never going to win that carrot by just constantly going to a job you hate. If it makes you miserable, that misery is going to emanate through all of your pores, and because it affects you on the cellular level. Every one of your 50 trillion cells is going to feel the negativity that comes from doing things over and over again that you hate. If you're in a relationship that's just abusive or terrible and doesn't make you happy, if you're, living in a place that you hate, you just got to do whatever you can, because there is this thing where it's like you fake it till you make it, dude. You give yourself the positive charge and you say, this is the things that make me happy, and this is, all I want to do. Because you feel it at your cellular level. This is a crazy thing. There's several things in this book that have just blown my mind. One of them is that we do think at the cellular level. Because of the membranes, the thinking, the brain of your cell is the membrane. There's a lot of talk about mitochondria in the health community, how you got to power up your mitochondria. Get on a keto diet, you power up your mitochondria. Your mitochondria is blowing up, your body's blowing up, and you fucking go and do some burpees, and then flex in the mirror, and then you get a six-pack, and then eat some butter and put it on your fucking coffee, and then that's fucking keto, bitch. Power your mitochondria. Your mitochondria is the energy factory, no doubt about it. But the membrane is the thinker, and you think with your membrane. And so what Lipton makes the case for is that we think with our bodies. We don't think with our brain. Our brain is the driver, but it's the subconscious driver. It's the subconscious driver driving us because in the first 7 years of our life, we are in a theta state. We're thinking with theta. Children up to the age of 7 years old act in a theta brainwave mindset. So the brainwaves are like alpha, beta, theta, delta. I think delta is where you're just out. Beta and alpha is like that. I think that kind of like fight or flight mode. Beta is like where you're just kind of like going around thinking. Theta is like that state right before you fall asleep. So it's hypnosis. But that's what children live their lives in up to 7 years old. This is why like I was just hanging out with my niece. She's 3, and I mean, goddamn, if I could only just live in her world for like 10 minutes. The guys my age fucking spend money on drugs and alcohol and on virtual reality and all these things to put their brains back into that way of thinking of like when you were 3 years old, because everything is just amazing. It's like you can take a plastic bag, or you can take like a doll, an inanimate object, and create an entire universe around it. Because that's theta, that's imagination, that's just your straight up subconscious. That's hypnosis. When you get put in hypnosis, when hypnotists buries you down to where they can control your brain, they're putting you in theta. When you're just about to fall asleep and then all those brilliant ideas start popping up, it's because you have a theta brainwaves working in your mind. And so when you're 7 years old, all up until you're 7 years old, all you're doing is thinking in theta, and all you're doing is downloading all of your environment, because that's the cellular reactivity, is just taking in all the shit outside of us. There is no inside of us. There is no thinking mind inside us. There's only a reactivity to the outside world. We have our genes, which are the hardware. The hardware we have creates the vessel, and then all the information is processed through our cells, through our membrane, and gets essentially and that's essentially how we create our personality. So when you're 7 years old, that's That's your personality. That's who you are in every different variation of that. But you're always going to be you. So I don't remember what the hell the point I was going to make was, but, you know, this is what it was, is now that you're an adult, this is the programming you have to work with, and now everything else is just a reaction based on that internal programming. But you can use your conscious mind to basically trick your programming into thinking. So it's like up until you're 7, you're thinking in theta, you're forming your personality, you're just in hypnosis, just reacting. You're learning through hypnosis. But then after 7 years old, it's repetition. It's repetition. So whatever you just put in your consciousness over and over and over again, whether it's good thoughts, bad thoughts, whatever it is, essentially that's what you're going to become. Whatever your conscious mind just keeps repeating over and over and over again. So this is why people deal with depression, because they get in that feedback loop of, I'm a failure, this thing will never work out, nobody loves me. Even if you try to crack a smile, even if you smoke some weed or you drink a beer or whatever, and you can crack, you're not genuinely happy, because you know you're doing that just to cover up. Whatever's bothering you. But if you sincerely basically fool yourself into believing a thing that you want to become, you somehow become that. You somehow basically train every cell, all 50 cells, all 50 trillion cells in your body to think in this certain way, and then they start to do that. Your body, your entire being starts to essentially create the reality that your mind is telling all the cells in your body to do. It's going into the membrane. The proteins that cross the membrane are essentially controlling the way your cells act. They're letting certain information pass through, other information that shouldn't pass through. This is kind of like reticular activation, like we talked about a couple podcasts ago. You know, when your brain says this is the thing we're going to focus on, and it just keeps repeating that, then slowly your body will start to transform into that, because that's how the cells think. That's how your brain thinks. That's how your biology works. Just repetition. So, it really is a different story. Once you start to, really hone in on what the biology is, it's silly to think that, people get so discouraged by self-help gurus, because self-help gurus, let's face it, a lot of them are just trying to sell you books. They're trying to sell you seminars, and they're full of shit, and they're really cheesy and annoying. And somewhere deep down inside a lot of these people who fall for this bullshit, they don't believe it. They're not convinced, because the person who's telling them this isn't convincing. They might show pictures and be like, oh, hey, I used to be a loser. I worked at Taco Bell. I slept on my mom's couch. I was 35. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had $13 to my name. And then I read this book, and then, I got hit by a car, and then all of a sudden my whole life changed, and now I'm a millionaire. And you know how I became a millionaire? I go around the country and hold seminars, and I tell other people that they can be millionaires if they just believe themselves. And you don't genuinely believe it. You want to believe it. You buy their book, you do their worksheets or whatever, and in the end, you just don't believe it. You have to have that real kind of trick yourself moment to believe it. And then once you really truly believe it, all of your cells work in harmony to manifest that thing that you truly believe. So, what I would recommend, man, is if you're in a self-help place, if you're just like in a dark place and you're like, where the hell do I start? It's not easy. I would say pick up this book. I would say read this book, Biology of Belief, and then convince yourself. I'm not going to convince you. It's not my job to convince you. All I can do is kind of give you my interpretation of this stuff. I'm not a guru or a self-help guru. I don't want to be. I never want to control anybody's life. On the same token, I believe in this shit. I believe, a variation of The Secret. And for the most part, I think my life's going okay. Somehow I've kind of been able to manifest a way that I don't have a fucking soul-crushing job and I'm surviving. I don't have to really answer to anybody, and it's kind of nice. I've never been to jail. I have no debt. I'm no shining example because I'm definitely struggling myself. But, the day that I bought into just kind of believing that I can make something of myself is the day that things started to really kind of turn around. And like I said, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. You can't just go a week and be like, man, I've been thinking positive this whole week and I don't have, the $100,000 that I need to pay off my student loan. So fuck this. I'm going to the bar. You got to let that shit go. You got to just buy into whatever you want, just over and over and over again, every single day, even when it's hard, even when those times get tough, because the science is there. The quantum physics is there. The cellular biology, it's there. All the proof is there. You just have to believe in it. So if you're looking for a self-help book and you're like, they're all corny and cheesy, I don't know where to start with Bruce Lipton's Biology of Belief. It'll blow your mind. There's so much more about this book that I would love to go into, and I'm sure I'll allude to it in future episodes, but, you have to check it out for yourself. I hope one day I can get Bruce on here and talk about the book because he is really a really fascinating dude, and the way he sees the world is just mind-blowing. So if you're going to take anything away from this episode, go on to Amazon, buy The Biology of Belief. I'll put the link in my in the podcast description here. You can just click that link, go on there. It'll even toss a few bucks back to the podcast if you have any desire to help me out here. Or just go on to YouTube and search Bruce Lipton, and you'll find interviews and speeches, and you'll see for yourself. It's fascinating stuff. So that's all for this podcast, you guys. Again, if you loved it, go on to iTunes, leave me 5 stars, leave a nice little review. If you're listening to this on your phone, make sure you hit the subscribe button in your podcast player. Go on to social media, leave me a little thing on Instagram, tweet at me. Join the Facebook page, All Holistic A-Hole on all the platforms. And if you have anything you want me to talk about, feel free to send me a message either on Facebook, or you can email me at holistic.a.hole@gmail.com and let me know what you think and anything you want me to talk about. Some people have done that already, and I really appreciate the feedback. So thanks again for listening, you guys. Hope you have a great day. Stay holistic. Peace.